In 1982, a series of unsettling phone calls began haunting residents of a small town in Illinois. It was the dead of night. People were tucked away in their homes. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. The phone would ring, and on the other end, silence. Sometimes, heavy breathing. Other times, a raspy voice whispered threats. These calls weren't pranks. They were terrifying incursions into the most private sanctuaries of people's lives. Their homes. The calls weren't just happening once either. They became relentless, night after night. The same chilling pattern. The residents were living on edge. They were trapped in a real-life horror movie. The small town, once a beacon of peace and tranquility, was now gripped by fear. The residents, once eager to answer their phones, were now paralyzed with dread every time it rang. Sleep, once a refuge, became a gamble. Would they wake to the chilling sound of the midnight caller? The police were called in. They had to find this midnight caller. They had to restore peace to their town. Little did they know they were up against a cunning adversary. This case would push them to their very limits. The calls were chillingly similar. Deep, heavy breathing, whispered threats. The victims were chosen seemingly at random. Men and women, young and old. The midnight caller didn't discriminate. The impact on the victims was devastating. Their sleep was disrupted. Their days were filled with anxiety. They were constantly looking over their shoulders. The police listened to the victims' accounts, but they were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry in their homes, no witnesses, and no leads. The technology to trace calls in 1982 was primitive. The caller was using payphones and moving from town to town. He was a ghost, disappearing into the night. The investigation was at a standstill. The police felt the pressure. The residents deserved answers. They needed a break in the case, and fast. What they didn't know was that the nightmare was about to get much worse. The midnight caller was just getting started. His reign of terror was far from over. News of the midnight caller spread like wildfire through the small town. The local newspaper ran a front-page story. People were talking about it everywhere. Neighbors whispered to each other over fences. The grocery store was abuzz with theories. Fear was contagious, and it was spreading faster than the truth. Rumors were rampant. Was the caller an escaped convict? A disgruntled ex-lover? A vengeful spirit? No one knew, but everyone had a theory. The townspeople, once a tight-knit community, became suspicious of one another. Every stranger was eyed with suspicion. Every unusual noise at night sent shivers down their spines. The once peaceful town was now a pressure cooker of fear and paranoia. The police, under immense pressure to solve the case, increased patrols. They set up roadblocks. They interviewed countless residents. But the midnight caller remained elusive. He was always one step ahead, toying with the police and terrorizing the town. The townspeople were starting to lose hope. Would their nightmare ever end? Then, the unthinkable happened. 2 women went missing. They were both single, living alone. They were last seen alive on nights they received calls from the midnight caller. The town held its breath. The worst fears of the residents were confirmed. The midnight caller wasn't just making prank calls, he was a predator. The police launched a full-scale investigation. They combed through the victims' apartments, looking for any trace of the caller. They interviewed friends, family, and co-workers, desperately searching for any leads. The pressure on the police was immense. They were now dealing with a double homicide investigation. The media descended upon the town. The story of the midnight caller was national news. Everyone wanted answers. The police worked around the clock. They had to find the killer. They had to bring him to justice. But time was running out. The longer the midnight caller remained free, the more dangerous he became. Section 5. Clues in the static. The police were baffled. The midnight caller was a ghost. He left no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses. Then, a breakthrough. One of the victims had a quirky habit. She recorded all her phone conversations on a small cassette recorder. It was a long shot, but the police listened to the tapes. Hours of mundane conversations. Family, friends, work. Then, they heard it. The chilling sound of the midnight caller's voice. It was faint, distorted, but it was there. The police had their first real lead. They sent the tape to the FBI. The FBI used cutting-edge technology to clean up the recording. They analyzed the voice, the background noise. They were looking for anything that could identify the caller. The pressure was on. The FBI worked tirelessly, analyzing every second of the recording. They knew this could be the key to cracking the case. Section 6. The mask slips. The FBI's analysis revealed a crucial clue. A distinct background noise. The rhythmic whirring of machinery. They identified the sound. It was the sound of a printing press. The police now had a new lead. They focused their investigation on printing presses in the area. They checked employee records, work schedules, and alibis. They were looking for anyone who fit the profile of the Midnight Caller. The investigation led them to a local newspaper printing plant. They zeroed in on a quiet, unassuming janitor named John Smith. John Smith was a model employee. He kept to himself. He was always on time. He had no criminal record. But something didn't feel right. The police decided to dig deeper. They obtained a search warrant for John Smith's apartment. What they found was shocking. The walls were covered in photos of the victims, maps with the victims' addresses circled, transcripts of the calls, written in chilling detail. John Smith was the Midnight Caller. Section 7. Unmasking the Caller. John Smith was arrested at the printing plant. He was taken into custody without incident. The news of his arrest spread through the town like wildfire. The residents were stunned. The quiet, unassuming janitor was the monster who had terrorized them for months. The police interrogated John Smith. They wanted to know why. Why had he terrorized their town? Why had he killed those women? John Smith remained silent. He showed no remorse, no emotion. He was a complete enigma. The police built a strong case against John Smith. They had the recordings, the evidence from his apartment, and his chilling lack of remorse. John Smith was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple counts of harassment and stalking. The trial was a media sensation. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and families of the victims. The evidence against John Smith was overwhelming. The jury found him guilty on all counts. Section 8. A community relieved. The verdict sent a wave of relief through the town. The nightmare was finally over. The Midnight Caller was behind bars. Justice had been served. The residents could finally breathe again. The fear that had gripped them for so long began to dissipate. The town slowly started to heal. The police were hailed as heroes. The residents came together to support the families of the victims. Life went on, but the memory of the Midnight Caller would never be forgotten. The case of the Midnight Caller had a profound impact on the town. It shattered their sense of security. It made them question everything they thought they knew. But it also brought them together. It showed them the importance of community, of looking out for one another. The Midnight Caller may have cast a dark shadow over their lives, but the residents emerged from the darkness stronger than ever. Section 9. Justice served. John Smith was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars, paying for his crimes. The families of the victims found some solace in the verdict. They would never get their loved ones back, but they could rest knowing that John Smith would never hurt anyone again. The case of the Midnight Caller served as a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. It showed that evil can hide in plain sight, even in the most unexpected places. The case also highlighted the importance of law enforcement, the dedication of the police, and the FBI in bringing criminals to justice. The residents of the small town never forgot the terror they endured. They learned to be more vigilant, more aware of their surroundings. They learned to appreciate the fragility of life and the importance of community. The case of the Midnight Caller was a tragedy, but it also served as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Section 10. Scars remain. Even though the case was closed, questions lingered. What drove John Smith to commit such heinous acts? Was he born evil, or was he a product of his environment? These were questions that would never be fully answered. The case of the Midnight Caller had a lasting impact on law enforcement. It led to advancements in call tracing technology and improved investigative techniques. It also highlighted the importance of victim advocacy and support. The residents of the small town carried on with their lives, but the scars of the Midnight Caller's reign of terror remained. They served as a constant reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the shadows. The case became a chilling urban legend, a cautionary tale whispered from generation to generation. The Midnight Caller may have been silenced, but his legacy of fear and paranoia lived on.